the Jewish calendar as a period of mourning, to get a sense of what we're mourning, because I think it's a common, we talk about it today as a generation that it struggles in the world that we live in to try to relate somehow to what we're supposed to be mourning and what Aveilus is all about. So that was kind of the prompt that I was given, and I decided that what I would do with that is give what I would like to do is I believe that we have time over several installments to really go deep. And what I want to do is kind of just to give you a sense of an overview first. I want to, what I plan, for example, on doing in this session is to provide a general overview and a framework for how the period of time is structured in the Jewish calendar, so that ultimately what I'd like to do is visit these issues on a conceptual level. So I'll give you an example. I want to talk about the construction of why the 3 weeks are the 3 weeks and how they came to be the 3 weeks. And then I want to take us back to really the, not just the historical stuff that we commemorate during the 3 weeks, but really the roots of Churban in the Chumash, meaning where Shavuos B'Tammuz is in the Chumash, where Tisha B'Av is in the Chumash, and from there to explore really what it's about, and then bring it all the way back. That's generally going to be, I believe, what I'd like our journey to be, and it's, in order to go deep. So what I'd like to do is, present. We're going to present various layers first as introductions to. Okay, so today, what I'd like to do is talk about the structure of the 3 weeks as a unit, how it functions in the Jewish calendar, why it is the 3 weeks, where that come from. And then after that, we're gonna maybe start to unpack that. And ultimately, what I'd like to do all this together is to have an appreciation really for how to use this time, what this time is all about in terms of Churban, what we're mourning, what the Golus HaShechina is, what Shechina is at all, what we're aiming for, and what the tikkun has to be, and the Gula. I would like to give us some sort of rudimentary footing in all that. That's the ambitious conceit. Okay?
Say your name and then say
yes,
what background.
Absolutely. Thank you for reminding me. I'm sorry. My name is Chanan Baer. I've been living here so far this time around for about 4 years. I've lived here with my family, my wife and kids, and I teach in several fine institutions in town, and I'm a painter and a graphic designer and an illustrator professional. Okay.
And Susan Cohen, she's the one who told me that you're her nephew, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. I'm thrilled that I have an aunt who's so proud to be related to me, that people I don't know, that I never met, know that I'm her nephew. So thank you. Okay. I spent right. Just to if it's helpful at all, I spent time here as a kid, and my mother's parents lived here, and this is a place very near and dear to me, and that's why I came back. So yeah, we're all happy to be here together. Let's talk a little bit about the 3 weeks. Okay. So first of all, the notion, what we call colloquially the 3 weeks, really they're called Ben HaMitzar, between the narrows or in the straits, Ben HaMitzar. And this is a terminology that comes from a pasuk in Eicha. The Megillah in Eicha, which is Yirmiyahu's lamentation about the destruction of Yerushalayim by the period of the first Beis HaMikdash, the pasuk says, Kol all who chased her. It's talking about Sion or Yerushalayim, right? Hisigua, they captured her, they grabbed her. Bein hamitzarim, in the narrows or between the narrows. Okay, it's a beautiful pasuk. You'll see there's going to be there's a couple or 3 psukim in Megillas Eicha that Chazal feel are very, very important on a homiletic level, on a drash, beyond the pshat, to give us insight really in some sort of cosmological import, meaning aside from Churban Beis HaMikdash being a historical event, there's something cosmologically going on here, and Chazal bring it out. So for example, when the pasuk says, when Yirmiyahu laments that all who chased her, chapped her, they grabbed her between the narrows, so Chazal see that as nevuah, what that really means is that there is a period of time called Bein HaMitzarim, between the narrows. We're going to talk about what those narrows are. And that's a time where Am Yisrael, so to speak, or the Shekhinah, is susceptible or vulnerable to kol rodfeha hisigua. All that chaser, all that are looking to chase her will catch, will grab her. And this sounds to us very much like this notion everybody kind of dreads when the 3 weeks come along. We've already been known, right? We know that like Tisha B'Av is that time that's earmarked, right? The calamities that befell, we always like to see how they're a function of the day. And it's because that day has been earmarked for time immemorial for all the bad stuff to happen, right? That kind of notion that we have. So already over here, Chazal are saying that Bein HaMetzarim is a certain time. Here, I'm going to read to you what Rashi says. Yeah, Rashi pretty much brings the Medrash Agada. It's the third pasuk of Echad, says like this. Okay, here's the pasuk. Gosa Yehuda Me'oni, that Yehuda was exiled out of a state of being poor. Umerov avoda, and from an abundance of labor, he yashava b'goyim. She ultimately dwelled among the nations. The Mefarshim explain over here that it means that after Yehuda was exiled after the destruction of the Churban, so they were afflicted in the nations of exile where they were, and eventually they didn't even come back. They settled there. Lo matzah manoach, and in their being stuck in exile among the nations, they did not find any rest. Kol rodfeha, all that chased her, all those parties that were seeking out harm for her, hisigua, they grabbed her. They were able to catch her. Bein hamtzarim, between the narrows. Rashi says, hamtzarim gvulim shasadeh v'kerem. They're on the level of pshat. It just means everybody in the borders of their particular field. They were afflicted and they were stuck. Medrash agada bein shiva asar b'tammuz l'tisha b'av. So Rashi brings overtly that Chazal identified that the Mitzar and the narrows are between two coordinates. One is Shiva Asar B'Tammuz, and the other is Tisha B'Av. But what's interesting is Shiva Asar B'Tammuz and Tisha B'Av have nothing to do with each other. Why did historically we invent this period of time that's bookmarked by two separate events that happen? I mean, we're used to, like I'm saying, I want to take this back. I'll start off today with, I'll start with the Mishnah. There's a Mishnah in Times. The Mishnah in Times says that there are 5 reasons why we have Shiva Asar B'Tammuz. Okay, the first reason is because of the breaking of the luchos, the shattering of the luchos. You know what? I'm going to read it to you. This is, by the way, if we can bear with it, I'm putting a whole bunch of stuff on the table first, and what I'd like to do is provide structure from that. So if we can all bear with me for okay, because I know like I'm going to bring it all together, but I want to raise some points first. Okay. 5 reasons that the Mishnah brings. It's a Mishnah in Timus for why Shiva Asar B'Tammuz is a fast. Okay. This is Sefer Toda'ah from Eliyahu Kitov, and I'm just going to read to you the English translation of the Mishnah. Okay. 5 calamitous events transpired on the 17th of Tammuz. The first tablets were broken when Moshe descended from the mountain and saw the golden calf and the accompanying rites. So it's a direct result of the Egel and the shattering of the Luchos. We're going to talk about that a lot. Okay? And that's pretty much the only example from the Chumash. And then the rest, the Mishnah continues as follows. The offering of the daily sacrifice was suspended in the first Beis HaMikdash, which means that when the Babylonians, there were successive stages till Yerushalayim was captured, subjugated, and ultimately to the destruction of the Beis HaMikdash and the exile of its people. And there were certain key moments that are marked by Chazal as being momentous in and of themselves that it's important to know. So this one is the Churban Tamid. The Churban Tamid was brought twice a day, even on Shabbos, in the Beis HaMikdash all the time, and that was kind of like daily fuel, so to speak, of the Hashras Hashchina in the Beis HaMikdash, and that attested to a regular, ongoing relationship between Am Yisrael and HaKadosh Baruch Hu that was at the point that it was manifest in the Beis HaMikdash with all the nisim that occurred on a daily basis in the Beis HaMikdash. And unfortunately, there's a whole event that happened that finally, when they surrounded the walls of Yerushalayim and they isolated Yerushalayim, Yerushalayim was not able to do commerce, or nobody could bring animals from the outside, right? So then they started to have a system that they would lower money for the Talmud down to the enemy soldiers, and they would send up an animal. And at some point, they just decided they're not doing it anymore, sent up a pig. But the point is that there was a terrible day where the functionality of the Beis Hamikdash ceased, that the Beis Hamikdash was no longer doing the carbon top. Okay, that happened in the period of Bayis Rishon on Shavasar B'Tammuz. Okay, the wall of the city was breached in the times of the second Beis Hamikdash, which means that once again, all the calamitous events that happened ultimately to destroy the second Beit HaMikdash also seem to have occurred. We're going to talk about the milestones in that by the second Beit HaMikdash also happening in Bein HaTzurim in the 3 weeks. And here, when the walls of Yerushalayim were ultimately breached by the enemy, that was also on Shavasar B'Tammuz. The Mishnah mentions, and there's a lot of discussion between the Talmud Yerushalmi and Talmud Bavli what this really means, who are we referring to? But the Mishnah says that there was an individual named Apistamus, which sounds like a Greek name, right? So that's for sure during the times of the Bayis Sheni, the second Beis Hamikdash. So the Mishnah says Apistamus, the wicked, he burnt the Torah. There was some sort of terrible Chil Hashem where he publicly burnt the Torah, and an idol was placed in the Heichal of Beis Hamikdash. Okay, that's the Mishnah. So that gives us all reasons to say that this day is the day that we should fast, we should do tshuva, etc. Those are a bunch of reasons. It's a list.
But doesn't it also show that there's some kind of connection to Tisha B'Av? I mean, all these things are like precursors or preliminary steps.
Right. So what I want to do is, after I put all the evidence on the table, I want to go deep and see what are the roots that unite all these things, and what's the inherent connection between Tisha B'Av and Shavasar B'Tammuz that it creates, as far as our Holy Torah is concerned, a zone of time. And why this zone of time? What is it earmarked for? What's happening? And what is our response meant to be? And how do we make the most of it? That's exactly. So we're going to parse out, spec out some of the patterns first, and then note them, and then try to make sense of them. So, okay. That's Shavasar B'Tammuz. Tisha B'Av, well, we talk about the destruction of Bayis Rishon and Bayis Sheni. And people in modern history talk about 1492, and they talk about World War I, and it's almost a game that we like to play, that we like to find meaning in all the calamitous things that happen to us by somehow being rooted in that phenomenon. Okay, so what's interesting is, okay, what I want to do is I want to talk about Shavasar B'Tammuz in its most original form, and I want to talk about also, maybe we'll get to it later, I want to talk about how really the period of the 3 weeks in a greater sense is part of a bigger pattern that has a function in the cycle of the year with other things. And what I would like to talk about at some point, when I get to it, after we explore Shavasar B'Tammuz, I'm telling you now that the period of the 3 weeks, which we call Churban and Aveilus, it is part of a process that goes to what we call the 7 weeks of Nechama, the Shiva de Nechanta, which also is the period, overlaps the period of Elul, and is a precursor, what we call the period of Tshuva. And then you have Rosh Hashanah, where we make Hashem king. And then we have Yom Kippur, where Am Yisrael collectively gets a kapara. And then we have the Yemei HaSimcha of Sukkot. And I would like to show at some point is that how it has a place, that it's actually a cycle. It's like a whole emotional and psychological kind of journey in our relationship with Hashem. Okay, so I'm just noting that now. Okay, so let's take a moment or two or three and talk about the original Shavasar B'Tammuz. What happened? Why is Shavasar B'Tammuz at all on the menu? So the Mishnah mentions the earliest event that we know that had a calamitous effect on our relationship with HaKadosh Baruch Hu was the story of the breaking of the Luchos, which was a result of the Egel. Now it's interesting that we don't say because this is the day they did the Egel, because it's not I don't know if it's the day they did the Egel, maybe they did the Egel the day before. I mean, we could figure it out, but it says it's the day that we broke the Luchos, which is interesting because also it's subtle, but it's an important note. We'll see that the Aveilus Churban that we talk about, we're not crying about something we did. That's tshuva. We're crying about something Hashem did. Like Hashem destroyed the Beis Hamikdash. Hashem set this into exile. So Churban is when it's like something that we had with Hashem that Hashem took away. Okay? All right. So what happened on Shavasar B'Tammuz? So the pasuk says that Am Yisrael got Tahar Sinai on the first of Sivan, the 3rd month, right after coming out of Mitzrayim. Right? They came out of Mitzrayim, and within 18 minutes they were in Sukkos on the 15th of Nisan, it's called Sukkos because there they were enveloped in the Ananei HaKavod. They were already experiencing, right? They had 18 minutes, a journey that should have taken at least maybe a day or 2 or 3. So Hashem showed us that He took us out with great zeal and chipazon, and He encased us in His Ananei HaKavod. And we came. There was the story of Lara and the Zakanim, and there was the story of the Fidim. And Am Yisrael said, "Hayesh Hashem b'kirbeinu." At the end of Shema, at the end of Parshas B'Shalach, after Kriyas Yaakov, Hayesh Hashem b'kirbeinu. We're not going to spend a lot of time. We're not going to spend time on that now, but that's super important. That results in the Fidim, Sherafu Yadayim and Torah, the battle with Amalek. But after they got that all out of the way, and they got the Be'er and the Mun, finally they come to Har Sinai, and the pasuk says, "Vayichan sham neged ahar ish echad b'lev echad." I'm sorry, Vayichan sham neged ahar. The pasuk says it says that they encamped, but it uses a lashon yachid, Vayichan as an individual, sham there neged ahar across from the har, the mountain that Hashem was going to give the Torah on. And Rashi brings the Medrash. Why does it say Vayichan as an individual? Because they were all together ki ish echad b'lev echad. And it's beautiful. Moshe Rabbeinu starts going back and forth as a shadchan between HaKadosh Baruch Hu and the Jewish people, that Hashem has a proposal that you should be to me, and you're going to be an Am Segula, and I'm going to bring you to me, Akamte Nisharim. And Am Yisrael says, Na'aseh Nishma, and all the symbolism Chazal pointed out it was a courtship, it was a marriage, and even the way that Eliezer Eved Avram was sent with the articles of jewelry, and how he betrothed Rivka Imenu to Yitzchak was the way that HaKadosh Baruch Hu looked at to how he should express himself to Am Yisrael at that moment. And even the fact that Moshe serves as a go-between, Rashi points out that he's acting as a shadchan. HaKadosh Baruch Hu could have said, "Hey, Am Yisrael, how do you feel about this? This is our mission statement. Hey, I'm looking for you to be for me a Mamlachas Kohanim v'Goy Kodesh." And Am Yisrael could have said, "Hey, that sounds great. Na'aseh v'nishma." But Moshe Rabbeinu is actually there, as part of the formality to show that it's, that there's a shachan about it. This is a legitimate courtship. And, Chazal say that all that hope was shattered when the import of the egel is seen as an infidelity, mamish tachas hachuppah. So the minutes were like this. There's a controversy in Chazal whether Matan Torah happened on. There's a question whether it was Zayin Sivan or Vav Sivan, right? We know that we celebrate Vav Sivan. It's a function of the counting, right? The day after the counting. There's no date anywhere that it gives for Shavuos in the Torah. It's always a function of the counting that starts by the second day of Pesach, and there's a discussion whether Moshe Rabbeinu actually pushed it off the day, if he actually made it Zayin Sivan or Vav Sivan. But basically, HaKadosh Baruch Hu said Yaser Sadibros. And that was a wild ride for Am Yisrael. On the one hand, they were like Olam Rishon Tola Machet, but at the same time, Parchu Nishmosan, and it was too much for them to handle. And they said, Moshe Rabbeinu, you got to do this for us because we can't approach God directly. This is going to kill us. And unfortunately, because of that, after Hashem did Yaser Sadibros, Moshe Rabbeinu was supposed to go up 40 days and 40 nights and bring down the Luchos and the Torah. Hashem is going to teach him the Torah for 40 days and 40 nights. 40 days from the 7th of Sivan was the 17th of Tammuz. That's when the Sultan basically told the Am Yisrael, he exploited their insecurities about their relationship with HaKadosh Baruch Hu and how devastating a encounter between a mortal and the divine can be. And he showed Am Yisrael a vision of an expired Moshe Rabbeinu who himself could not confront HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And he said, you guys don't have a choice. And they panicked. And they said, we need to go between. We need an intermediary. And somehow, without getting into it too much, the Erev were able to turn that into Avodah Zarah. So that when Moshe Rabbeinu came down, he shouted the Luchos. That was the 17th of Tammuz. Then what happened was, there's varying accounts based on Rashi and the Rambam. But basically what happened was, let's see, you have 3 periods of 40 days. Okay? You have from Zayin Sivan to Shavasa B'Tammuz, where HaKadosh Baruch Hu came down and he smashed the Luchos. Then there was the day of cleanup, where he had to find all the criminals mete out divine punishment. That's the whole story where the Levi and then Moshe Rabbeinu took care of all the people that caused it to be in Arlozoroff, and then he moved his tent out of town, and that begins on the 29th, they say, of Tammuz. Moshe Rabbeinu started a process of 40 days of tshuva. And that's the period of time where we have in Kisisa, where it talks about, we lane that on every public fast day. That's where Hakadosh Baruch Hu and Moshe Rabbeinu are negotiating for the future of Am Yisrael, and to the degree that Hashem's continued Hashros Hashchina will be with Am Yisrael. And Moshe Rabbeinu asks for certain things, and that's where Hakadosh Baruch Hu coaches him and gives him the 13 attributes of mercy, so that whenever we get a hiccup again in our history, in our relationship with Hashem, there will be somehow a way for us to work things out. Okay, so that is a period of 40 days from the 29th of Tammuz to the to the 29th of Av. And then there's a 40 days starting Rosh Chodesh Elul, where Moshe Rabbeinu goes up again 40 days to receive the second Luchos. Okay, and so starting from Rosh Chodesh Elul till the 10th of Tishrei, which is Yom Kippur, Moshe Rabbeinu is getting the second Luchos, and the first Yom Kippur that we have in history wasn't Yom Kippur, where, and not necessarily that I know, where Aaron and Cohen necessarily did that, Avodas Yom Kippurim, but that was the day that Moshe Rabbeinu came down to bring the second Luchos. So the roots of the Yom Kippur really are a Yom Matan Torah. That's important to note. So that was kind of like the story. There's three sets of 40 days. So what's very, very interesting is that Shavasar B'Tammuz, the imports, let's spend some time talking about what the import or the impact of that was on our relationship with HaKadosh Baruch Hu and how that changed things. So first of all, the walk away of, there's a machlokas rishonim, whether the Mishkan is a function of the Chera Egel or somehow the Mishkan changed. We would have had a Mishkan, but it changed. But either way, it directly affected our ability to have Hashros HaShechina in Machane Yisrael, for the Shechina to be in our camp. But the biggest takeaway from from the story of the Egel is the idea of Yom Kippur. Yom Kippur is basically, Hashem says, look, I had great hopes for us. My hopes were not shattered at this terrible event that happened, but I realized, so to speak, that we're in it for the long haul. And Am Yisrael is not on the level of maturity to maintain the standards of relationship that are necessary at this moment. This is going to be a learning process. And to allow for HaKadosh Baruch Hu's continued involvement with us till we get there, we need something called Hashocheni Tam B'Soch Tumasa. That even though the relationship's not perfect and we can't be who we're meant to be, on the hopes and the eventual potential that should be fulfilled, in order for us to fulfill that potential, Hashem's going to be with us along the way. And in order for Hashem to be there, there's got to be something that allows for him to withstand where it's not good. Okay, so Hashem built into our relationship this yearly cycle of washing away a kapara, just to allow, meaning its effect that we could have been other relationship. That happened at some point. The Chazal say, Paskuzu Amasam, the toxin of the Nachash HaKadmoni, which was inside of us, that has messed up humanity, that humanity can't, not only the whole world is not in state to ultimately allow for a reflection and a manifestation of Shekhinah, the way HaKadosh Baruch Hu wants, but also that a human being has been corrupted from the inside, and that was taken away at Mount Torah, and that was for a fleeting moment. And then because of the ego, and the whole question is, how could they have done the ego? There's a lot to talk about there. But essentially, Chazal say, Rabbi Churban Levi says, Gemara in Avodah, he says that the ego could never have happened except that HaKadosh Baruch Hu wanted to give us a Pesach for tshuva, which is just like we're saying about Yom Kippur, that there was a breakdown that happened on this day, on Shavasar B'Tammuz, that kind of showed us and demanded that HaKadosh Baruch Hu make allowances for in our relationship and in the cosmos, some sort of patch to allow a continued relationship with the hopes that will ultimately get to where he initially intended. Okay? So that's kind of the beginnings of what I want to, like, we're forming a sense of what Shavasar B'Tammuz is. Okay? It's a time of something terrible happened, and yet somehow the takeaway for that is to allow for eternity, meaning till we get to the finish line with Mashiach and the third Beis HaMikdash and Hashros HaShechina, where HaKadosh Baruch Hu is more, as much in the physical world as anywhere else. Till we get there, there are certain things that need to be put into place. And how important it is for us to focus on where we are lacking and why we're not there. Okay, so we get a Yom Kippur out of this, and we get an idea that really it's impossible really for a human being to start off perfect and maintain perfect. Just the opposite. A person has to grow into something, and you only learn in the field. This is a huge statement. I mean, from Chazal say this, but it's so important for a human being to know this, because I'm still learning this. But the idea is that Olam Haba was made with a Yud and Olam Hazeh was made with a He. And that means that, like Chazal say, Ein divrei Torah miskaymin ela misha ogar, which means that you cannot do a good job in your avodas Hashem without constantly failing over and over and over again until you learn how. You know, when I was a kid, I still feel like I'm a kid because there's so much I got to learn. But I feel that what really helped me back for a long time was my thinking that before I take a step forward in a particular area in life, I need to be a master of that first. As if to think that you could be a master of anything not being there. And only once and I realized I had a roommate that was in medical school at the time. And it seems that the year of his residency, we were both thinking about how all the wasted time that he went through and all the extra stuff and it's more about the acculturation and indoctrination that he had to go through for medical school. But Ma'aseh, in terms of the practice of medicine, how to be a doctor, he learned more in residency than during his time in medical school. And it helped me understand, we're talking about how the only way to become good at anything in this world is to do it. And it's not going to happen right away. And you have to be prepared to fall again and again and again. You have to know what to look for to know if you're making progress or not, but you cannot let that pattern get you down. That's not an indication that you're not, that it's doomed to fail. That's just the only way to do it, okay? And Chazal say that is the hay of Olam Hazeh. That this world, it's got an opening on the side and it's got a trapdoor that's a very, very large trapdoor on the bottom. And the people that fall out through the bottom, they can still kind of with tshuva, they can come up to the top and get back in. That's kind of like how Chazal talk about it. And the idea is that, if you're going to go through life trying to be unmarred and undisturbed and unfailed and never make mistakes and everything is pristine and perfect, then you're going to take it hard when there's a hiccup or something, or then your approach is not going to help you get anywhere. And you have to make peace with the fact that it's actually, you got to get used to things not working. And that's the only way you're going to grow and actually learn anything and thrive and become better at something. So you have to be prepared, and so really that's the story you'll see that in the Chumash, the story, okay, we're like I said, today, this session, everything's gonna be all over the place. So thanks for bearing with me. But we're gonna see that the story in the Chumash, from the Chumash point of view, of four of them is a result of, I would say, three big things that we've talked about in the Chumash. There's the Gerushin from Gan Eden. That's Adam Rishon getting kicked out of Gan Eden. There's the Egel, there's the Meraglim. And we'll see, even what we read about at Chukas, with Moshe Rabbeinu on a personal level, these are all moments that are kind of almost like a setup. And they're kind of built into history because HaKadosh Baruch Hu was trying to coach us about something about actually really achieving and maintaining something in a real way that would have been impossible in this world if it were just handed to us. Meaning that's a big thing going on in the background. So ultimately, meaning the goals and the goals part of things are kind of like built into reality. And it's a result historically of things we did, but it would have happened anyway. And what we're supposed to do with that and kind of like be empowered by the goals that we're experiencing to actually bring the world into the Ula. That's kind of like ultimately, that's really the vision of what Hashem had in mind. That all these things, by the way, everything that I mentioned, we're going to go over again and again. We're going to revisit them deeper and deeper. Okay. So, so now, so Shivasu B'Tammuz is the first side of the 3 weeks, and that collectively for Am Yisrael, that is a historical time that notes a great breakdown in our relationship with HaKadosh Baruch Hu that had ramifications and repercussions that we still live through today. Chazal say that every time a person cries, he should have in mind to do tshuva for the ego. Meaning we're still paying, even though Moshe Rabbeinu was able to patch it up, with the 13 attributes of mercy, and it's kind of like it was set in existence. It's something that it colors our relationship today with us, and that's something that we have to be conscious of and more. Okay. Now, what's interesting is the Tisha B'Av is a slightly different idea. I would posit. I want to look at that idea and then maybe see how they work together. Shavuos and B'Tammuz and Tisha B'Av. Okay, so Tisha B'Av, everybody knows. There's a story of the Macabbi, right? Oh, I'm sorry. If you don't mind, I want to take a minute or two to just read a couple notes on what we just spoke about from the Chumash here, the art scroll. Basically, I don't know if it's necessary, but I'd like to do it just for fun. Okay?
Take questions at the end.
You don't have to. If it'll help clarify something or move the conversation forward, absolutely, you can. Yeah.
So you said that we're not crying for what we did wrong, that Shiva, we're crying for what Hashem.
So
But isn't that like because we did something wrong as a nation, then Hashem did these things that created Christ? So aren't we also in effect crying for Shiva, so we are better people, so Hashem also treats us with reward, not punishment?
excellent. So that's exactly. I want to talk about the idea of the chiyah of crime, which is specifically what Tisha B'Av is about, and I'm going to talk about that. Okay, so if you give me a moment, but I just want to recap just a couple of things. I'm sorry. Major note. Okay. Sorry. The end of the Chumash. Says like this. It's really fantastic what Chazal see in that, but it's important to note this. Okay. The last words of the Chumash. It says, "Ulechol hayad chazaka," and by all the strong hands, "Ulechol hamore hagadol," and all the awesome power, all the great miracles, asher asa Moshe le'enei kol Yisrael, that Moshe did to the eyes of all of Israel. Rashi says, le'enei kol Yisrael. Oh, what's the chol hayad chazaka? What are we talking about? That Moshe Rabbeinu has a yad chazaka, strong hand. Shekibo es haTorah beluchos biyodah. He was a human mortal that received the luchos of the Torah in his hands from Shemayim. Le'enei kol Yisrael, to the eyes of all of Israel. The last three words of the Chumash. What does it say? Shenaso libo lishbar haluchos le'enei. That his heart raised itself, that he should smash the luchos to the eyes of Am Yisrael. Shenema, because the pasuk says, the eshberem le'enechem. Moshe Rabbeinu, when he's telling over the story in the bar, he says, and I smashed them in front of your eyes. So somehow, because it says eine kol Yisrael, we know that the word ayin here is a reference to where he said, I smashed in front of your eyes. Why does he have to say in front of your eyes? The Heskima das HaKadosh Baruch Hu l'daita, and HaKadosh Baruch Hu was masking. He agreed with what Moshe Rabbeinu did. Shenamar, because there is a drasha on the words Asher Shibarta. So when Moshe Rabbeinu was invited by God on the 29th of Av to come up again and get the second luchos, Hashem says, and I'm going to write on these second luchos that which I wrote on the first ones that you broke. Why do you have to say in the pasuk that you broke? Chazal say Asher Shibarta, Yasher Kochacha Sheshibarta. Good job that you smashed. You did a good job. What's Hashem so happy about? And that's how we end the Chumash? What's going on? Good question, right? What does Hashem care about the most? Why does Moshe Rabbeinu even exist? You know, there's a Rashi that points out by Vayikra, it says that Hashem calls Moshe. It's a Lashon Chiba. He loves Moshe. Moshe is really special. How could Moshe not be? And this is a taina that the Umas HaOlam had, which brings us to this week's parsha, why they got a Navi like Bilam. So Rashi says, despite the tremendous love that Hashem will have for Moshe, don't think that anything that Hashem, any favors, or meaning any communication that Moshe Rabbeinu had was for his own benefit, but rather because HaKadosh Baruch Hu loves the Jewish people. Hashem wants to have a relationship with the Jewish people, yet we kind of needed, on our level of maturity at that point historically, when it happened, we needed an individual like Moshe Rabbeinu to facilitate that. That was Moshe's role, but Moshe Rabbeinu was only there, his whole creation was only there to facilitate HaKadosh Baruch Hu's desired relationship with Am Yisrael. Okay, what Hashem cares about, why he gave us the Chumash, why Moshe Rabbeinu gave us the Torah. It's all for Am Yisrael. And if Moshe Rabbeinu did something and Hashem says, good job, that's because somehow it allowed for us to maintain that connection with Hashem. So what Hashem's saying is the fact that you smashed the luchos is what allowed us to fix things. This is already the beginnings of the insight of what happens at Churban. Okay? Hashem takes away something that ultimately, even though it's experienced by us as a tremendous loss, that is actually what's going to allow us, because of where we're at, we need something like that to happen that ultimately will allow us to maintain the relationship. So when Moshe Rabbeinu said, I'm going to give Am Yisrael the luchos, that would have essentially, that's kind of like putting the ring on the finger. And if they would have actually sealed the deal then on that level, then they would have to pay the price for all the terrible things that they did. So what Moshe Rabbeinu did, well, what is the difference between a connection that Am Yisrael would have had on the level of the first luchos and versus the level of the connection we have because of the second luchos? There is a huge qualitative difference from the fact that we are connected, that the luchos that we received are the second luchos. You know, if we would have received the first luchos, everybody would have had a perfect knowledge of the Ratzon Hashem within them automatically. And because we would have been on the level of Adam Rishon Adam Afet, there would have been, sorry?
That means that they were not being struggling.
Right, exactly. There would have been no need anymore because they were already on the level of Adam Rishon Adam Afet. They said Nasa v'nishma. Now the only thing that's missing is for God to wipe away the toxin of the snake and give them a perfect knowledge of God. Remember, God didn't just give us the Torah to tell us what to do and how to live. He gave us the Torah to give us himself. It happens to be in this state that the world is in and the state that humanity is. After Cheta Adam, the Torah also needs to be full of instruction on how to live a life that we can connect to him. But really, Hashem put himself in the Torah. It's by all, meaning the Torah is the ketubah that makes us married to him, that facilitates our relationship with him, that transcends physics, that transcends nature, that's actually meant to allow this world to transform into a higher form of itself, okay? So the second luchos, the style, the signon of the hallmark of the second luchos is when Moshe Rabbeinu is called psal lecha, fashion for yourself. Moshe Rabbeinu now has to provide the actual tablets. Hashem's still going to write it. It's still going to have the same content, but we have to provide the luchos for God to write on. What does that mean? That the first ones, right? We not only would it have been that we would each one would have a perfect grasp, but also everybody individually would have had a relationship with Hashem like the whole nation of Israel has. No individual has that today. To the degree that we're connected to Yisrael, we benefit from the relationship that Hashem has with Yisrael. Now, everybody has a personal cheshbon and a personal relationship, but it's only within the context of the relationship we have because we are part of Nishmas Yisrael. Also, yes.
Would you say that it's in the same way that like the lesser relationship we have between the Bayit Rishon and the Bayit Sheni, same
That's
idea?
an interesting parallel. We can explore that. Well, let's talk about this, and then when we go back, because the big difference between Bayit Rishon and Bayit Sheni was, in terms of the mission, there were 10 Nisan that happened every day that did not happen by the second because there was no Shechina. And I would hate to think that the difference between Luchos Rishonos and Luchos Shnios is a lack of Shechina, because all the Shechina we have really is facilitated by the fact that we're connected with Hashem through the second Luchos. So I'm not sure. We can explore that. I think that's a good question. Okay, but I just want to say that the psal lecha that you should carve for yourself, that God told Moshe, that means that our relationship with Hashem today is completely within what you bring to the table. It's your Mesiras Nefesh. It's how you see your life in the context of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. In learning Torah, it's the cards that Hashem gave you, how much, meaning the intellect that you have and the time that you have. It's what you do with it. Meaning you are meant now to work, and you're, to the degree that you put in, you can't expect to have more than you put in. Now, even what you put in is not enough to get any. All Torah is a gift. Remember, if we're trying to connect to something that's beyond us, there's nothing we can do. It's not like nobody can be a genius enough ever to understand anything in Torah. You can have an intellect and you can process Torah, but ultimately, if you want to understand something in Torah, if Hashem lets you understand it, you understand it. If Hashem doesn't, there's nothing, because it's mamish what Hashem is chonin from you, because the whole point is to connect to Him. Okay, anybody who thinks that they're getting by on Torah, they have a grasp of Torah on the strength of their intellect, they are outside of the spiritual connection that they're supposed to get out of learning Torah. Okay, Psalacha means that the connection we have now to the Luchos is mamish to the degree, the Mesiras Nefesh that you put it. Okay? So HaKadosh Baruch Hu is saying that on some level we understand that Moshe Rabbeinu saved Am Yisrael and he saved the world and he saved Hashem's interests by not delivering those initial first luchos, and that allowed us, gave space for us to actually have a luchos shnios that will, so to speak, buy time till we can get to where it's supposed to be originally intended, luchos rishonos. In that regard, Bayis Sheni is very much like that, because everybody knew. I always thought it must have been the most depressing time in history, Ezra and Nehemiah, because everyone knew it's got to be 3 Batei Mikdashim. So the whole thing is like it's a rubber bullet. So that must have been so depressing. So my father told me that, and I think I gotta go through my notes, but there's sources that say that they had anticipated that it's not that the second bias would have been destroyed, but they would start it off in this lowly state, and it should have been upgraded. Okay.
I like breaking in the edge of one of the sides that are not ready for the continuum.
So what's the analogy?
And then re-engaging.
It's different because we're actually married. It was a marriage, yeah. And in fact, so in halachic marriage, there's actually 2 steps to the process. There is a step to the process where the groom and the bride it's not legal for them to be intimate, but she is no longer available to anybody else. He basically essentially reserves her so that they can have a relationship. He still has to become allowed to be with her, but she is forbidden to be with anybody else. Right? There's Erisin and Nisuin. So according to Chazal, we didn't consummate the marriage, and yet we were halachically bound to be uniquely dedicated to him. That's where the analogy comes from. Right? It saved the marriage. That's what it did. It saved the marriage. But marriage was not what God intended, but he saved the marriage in a way to allow for a relationship that ultimately will achieve that. We're in it for the long haul. So, HaKadosh Baruch Hu has a child bride. Okay? We went from Yetzias Mitzrayim, which is called the birth of Am Yisrael, B'ni B'chor Yisrael. All the symbolism of Yetzias Mitzrayim is a birth. In the schus of the Miyaldos HaIvrios, Moshe Rabbeinu is the Miyalei Ha'uma. And his staff, right, he tells Paro, if you don't loosen them up, the Meitzarim of the womb for Am Yisrael to be born, I'm going to be the Makos, right? That's going to loosen you up. There's a beautiful Medrash. I'm not going to get into it now because it's not Pesach now. It's Hashem. Maybe if we talk about Pesach, but the Nachash and the staff is connected to a Medrash Tehillim that there is an Ayol that can't give birth, and she cries out, and Hashem says a snake, and the womb loosens up. Meaning, Am Yisrael was the idea of Bechor, Peter, the Rechem, the Kedushas of Bechor that comes from Am Yisrael, all comes from Yetzias Mitzrayim. So we went from a birthday in a very short amount of time to already 49 days later, we're meant to have a wedding. Okay, we go from birth to all of a sudden we're capable now of having a relationship, but we're not psychologically mature. And not only that, but you can chart really the Chumash. See, Sefer Bamidbar is where all the issues are raised. The Torah highlights all the stories that raise the psychological issues that Am Yisrael had that got in the way for our relationship to be everything that Hashem was hoping would be at that moment, and kind of like what we realize we have to eventually learn. And Hashem is dedicated to the process, but this is one of the first crucial moments that Hashem kind of had to dedicate himself to the process and then lay out what the process would be. Okay, now let's talk about Tisha B'Av for a second. Meraglim, why they do what they do, we could talk about it. Why? But basically, they were so subversive that they got all of Am Yisrael to cry, and they stayed up all night crying. And Chazal say, "Atem b'chita and b'chia shalchina, ani ekba lechem b'chia shel golos." You guys cried for nothing. Here I had a brand new palatial estate planned for us to move into. I had all the cupboards and the fridge stocked up. I got all your favorite, it's beautiful furniture. I got staff. Everything is perfect, right? And they got you to say, oh, it's a disaster and it's going to be terrible. Listen, you guys need to cry. I'm going to give you something to cry about. Meaning, today's a cry day. You're crying about the wrong things. So whenever there's going to be something to cry about, this is the day that you decided I'm going to have UPS deliver the thing to the house on this day. Okay, that's kind of how Chazal see what Tisha B'Av is. Now, of course, it resulted also in a galus. Also, there was a form of Churban, right? And we were wandering around for 40 years and not being in a place that HaKadosh Baruch Hu articulates or characterizes in the Chumishas as a Macabbi, right? El Nachla, right? The Al Hamenucha Vel Nachla, the place of rest. Where HaKadosh Baruch Hu, let's just be a bias together. Let's have a home. Let's be in a relationship with Hashvas Hashchina. That was pushed off for 40 years. So it's in a way, it's another story, mini story of what happened in Shavas Thomas. But the focus here is on Bechia, which brings me to your question, right? Okay. Bechia, crying. Okay, so let's talk about the function of crying. Okay. Why would Hashem give us things to cry about? Hashem didn't say that on Tisha B'Av, because you cried, I'm going to give you stuff to cry about. No. That's not what he said. He said if there's anything to cry about, it's got to be today. So why would you give us things to cry about? And why do people cry? So I would say there's two reasons why we cry. We cry because of where we feel bad about something that we did, and we're looking to get past it, namely tshuva. We regret, we're broken about something, we're heartbroken about something, and we don't want to be in that reality. And actually, in crying, we're actually coming closer to Hashem. But there's a stage before, there's a different kind of crying. That's a crying of loss. That's of loss and grief, of Aveilus. There's the Aveilus of a Churban, and there's the Bechia of tshuva. Okay, there's crying because I just suffered a loss and I'm broken, and then I'm grieving psychologically. I'm coming to terms with the fact that there's something that was so integrally can't see until now. Life included, that was a defining thing in life. I can't imagine life without that. Now it's taken away from me. There's a form of grieving. It's even death for me. I cannot exist. That picture of my reality cannot be sustained anymore because it's gone. And that's a terrible brokenness that results in crying. Maybe we'll pick it up later, but in the pasuk, the last pasuk, and then the Chumash, where it says "Le'einei kol Yisrael," to the eyes of all of Am Yisrael. Chazal know that that's referring to Asher Shibartem Le'einechem, that Moshe says that I broke it in front of your eyes. It's referring to the breaking the Beis Hamikdash. It's interesting because there's a pasuk in Eicha that says "Eini yardu dima," my eyes, the tears fell. And actually, the Macabbi talk about how Eini is a reference to the month of Tammuz and the month of Av. So ultimately, the Macabbi use the whole idea of eyes and dima to explore these, and maybe we'll get to that. Okay, but that okay. So what I want to say is, Shivasa B'Tammuz is something that we did that Hakadosh Baruch Hu, that resulted in the Churban, the smashing of something, taking away of something. Doesn't say anywhere that we cried, right? But somehow something we did demanded that Hakadosh Baruch Hu address it. Or Moshe Ben had to address by taking something away from us. And the irony is, when something wasn't taken away from us, on Tisha B'Av, that's when we cried, and Hashem says, listen, if there's anything to cry about. So you see that all of a sudden now, that these two things have to come together. That even though the incident of Shavas B'Tammuz and the incident of Tisha B'Av had nothing to do with each other, it completes a package which is about how we cope with where we're not where we need to be in our relationship with Hashem, and what Hashem does, or what Moshe did, what has to happen for us to understand there's a problem, and ultimately it's also what buys us a second chance. That's my thesis, kind of my starting thesis for approaching this period of time and what Churban and Aveilus is. Okay? Okay, yes. Okay. Shavasa B'Tammuz is a moment where there's a breakdown in our relationship with HaKadosh Baruch Hu because of what we did, and because of that we experience a loss. Right? Moshe Ben smashed the luchos. We have what that relationship was supposed to be never got consummated at that level. There's a tragic loss. And Tisha B'Av is a time that we are meant to cry. Okay? So why do we cry? Because we cried. Hashem says if you ever need to have things to cry about, that's going to be the day. Why would Hashem ever give us something to cry about? What does that mean, something to cry about? Well, you don't realize that you're not on the level that you should be, and we're not together with what we are. I have to take away something for you to realize that. So whether it's Moshe Ben smashing the luchos, or HaKadosh Baruch Hu taking away the Beis Hamikdash, right? Or you don't want to hang out, you don't want to go to Israel, so wander around for a while until you realize that something's missing, right? So it's Hashem has to basically, there's two steps in our crying. We cry because Hashem, first of all, unfortunately, Aveilus, we go through an Aveilus. We don't realize that there's Churban. We realize that there's Aveilus. And that is meant to be a process that ultimately turns into Churban. Because ultimately, we realize that everything Hashem does is for the good, and He doesn't take away anything except to actually give something better. And somehow, for whatever reason, the Churban that we're experiencing is a form of tikkun that actually facilitates something much more real. Okay? So I'll tell it to you. Okay, so you know what? All this stuff we're gonna keep on going back to. Okay, the only reason why I'm mentioning these things is to understand why it's weird to have a period of time called 3 weeks, bookended by two things that don't really they were never 3 weeks. Okay, so but why? Okay, so that's the anatomy. Okay, okay. So now, how are we doing for time? 7 minutes. Okay. Okay. So I just before we wind down, so I just want to. Yeah. Okay. So I want to have another introduction to all the stuff we've been talking about until now through the context of Tammuz as a month. This is what I mean to say. Okay. So the Mekubalim teach us that each month has a corresponding iteration of Hashem's name of Yud Kei Vav Kei. Okay, I mean, maybe some people are familiar with this, maybe they're not, but basically it's like this. Okay, the word Chodesh has the numerical value of 12 times Yud Kei Vav Kei. Yud Kei Vav Kei is 26, 12 times that, the word Chodesh, which means that every Chodesh has its unique permutation of Yud Kei Vav Kei, meaning HaKadosh Baruch Hu manifests Yud Kei Vav Kei in the world in a specific way. And that's actually, anybody who has a ReStarTzfat will see that these intentions are brought down in the Musaf of Rosh Chodesh. When you say the bracha of that God sanctifies Am Yisrael and the Chodesh, so the Kedusha of the Chodesh comes from the Kedusha of Am Yisrael, right? Right? As opposed to Shabbos. Shabbos happens because God put Shabbos in the world, but Chodesh, HaChodesh HaZelachem, when Am Yisrael declares Chodesh, that's what makes it Kadosh. So God sanctified us and the Chodesh, which means that Hashem's kind of the iteration, the shefa, the type of shefa that Hashem wants to meet out in that month, it's up for Am Yisrael to channel that. So we have the intent of it. So what's very interesting is the permutations change. So and they all have an associated pasuk. Nisan is the first month for this cycle, and it starts off Yud Kei Vav Kei. By the time we get to Tammuz, which is the fourth month, we have Yud Kei Vav Kei backwards. It's exactly backwards. It's Hey, and then a Vav, and then a Hey, and a Yud. And it comes from the end letters of a pasuk in Megillas Esther that says, Zeh einena shaveh li. This is not worth it to me. Now, these are the words of Haman in the Megillah when he comes home disgruntled about the fact that he's riding high. He's the most powerful person in the empire of 127 countries. The king gave him a ring. There's a rule that everybody's got to bow down to. And there's one guy, there's one lousy, conscientious objector. The whole he comes home to his wife and he says, if I can't have it all, it's not worth it. What a Russian. What a Russian. And HaKadosh Baruch Hu is using the words of Haman and that sentiment to express himself in the month of Tammuz. Help. What does that mean? It's a good question, right? I really want to know. And I would like to demonstrate within this kind of like an insight, which is another introduction. We'll lay it all forward. This is a crucial idea. Okay. Zeh, the end of the last letter is Hey. Einena, right? 1 second. Zeh, Einena, Eineno, with a Vav. Shaveh, with a Hey. Li, with a Yud. Okay. So imagine, remember, we said, Haman, he just got the signet ring, anything he wants. He's effectively prime minister, and people have to worship him. And there's one guy that undermines it all. He can't have it total, it just sticks in his craw, and he's got to eradicate the whole people now because, right, it's mamish like the Mishnah in Avos that talks about the difference between the Talmidim of Avram Avinu and the Talmidim of Bilam HaRasha. He's got to have it all. He's got a nefesh rechava. It's all about him. He's a narcissistic, egotistical maniac. Okay, what does Hashem mean? How's the Shekhinah talking through these words? So the way I think about it is like this. Imagine the most powerful human being on the planet, the most wealthy, respected person that everybody, imagine this person, that everything he says, people jump, he gets paid so much money to speak for an hour to give counsel about business or law. He is the most knowledgeable. He's like Mamish, I don't know, some great guy. When he talks, governments jump and economists jump, and he drives the best cars and the fanciest, he wears the fanciest watches, and he's got Mamish, he's living on top of the world in his public persona. He has a lot of real power and a lot of, he's got it all. And he comes home and his wife does not love him and his children don't respect him. He's a king, Mamish, anywhere outside the house. And he comes to the house and there's no connection there of love with his wife. Or he doesn't have a good relationship with his wife, and his kids don't respect him, and there's no love there. So what does it matter? What does it matter if he's got the whole world eating out of the palm of his hands, and at home where it really matters the heart? There's nothing to it. Okay, I would posit that that's what HaKadosh Baruch Hu tells us in Talmud. And Talmud, Hashem says, listen, there are things going on in our relationship which are distractions. You think it's really nice that you have the car. It's really nice that you have the watch. It's really nice that people jump at you. But you know what? We got a problem at home. And if you don't get it, you're going to have to take away the suits and the watch and the car and your reputation even, so that we can address what's really important. So it's very nice that we got a building on Har Havayis with an altar and a lot of karbanos and all the pomp and luxury and majesty of the avoda and the vessels and the vestments. But you know what? Am Yisrael, you're not being real in the relationship. This is a distraction. This is Eitzim Ba'avanim. This has to go. Maybe, well, except there's a problem now. Maybe now we can begin to actually address the relationship. So that's what I wanted to say. That's what Talmud is about. And hopefully, Hashem will pick up next time.
Thank you. We've been hanging here, right?
We really need to go to the next class.
Okay, that's exactly right.
Okay.